You know, people always ask me what I miss most about being a detective. The adrenaline? The chase? The satisfaction of putting handcuffs on a criminal? But after 35 years on the force and 5 years of retirement, I can tell you what I miss most is the puzzle. The moment when all the pieces click together and you realize you've been looking at the picture all wrong. And let me tell you, retirement doesn't mean the mysteries stop coming your way. My name is Detective Frank Morrison, retired from the Chicago PD, and what I'm about to tell you is the strangest case I've ever worked. Stranger still because I wasn't even supposed to be working it. It was supposed to be someone else's problem. But sometimes the case chooses you, not the other way around. It started on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years into my retirement. I was doing what most 70-year-olds do, complaining about my coffee being too weak and reading the newspaper like it was going to solve all the world's problems. My wife Margaret was in the kitchen, humming some tune I didn't recognize, when our doorbell rang. Now, we don't get many visitors at 8 in the morning, so Margaret gave me that look. Oh, you know the one that says, "Go see who it is before I have to get up." Standing on my porch was a woman I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a jogging outfit that looked like it cost more than my monthly pension check. She was nervous, fidgeting with her car keys, and had that look in her eyes that I'd seen 1,000 times before. The look of someone who needed a cop but didn't want to call one. "Are you Frank Morrison?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Depends who's asking," I replied, though I already knew this wasn't going to be a simple visit. "I'm Sarah Chen. I live 3 blocks over on Maple Street. I know you used to be a detective, and I need help. Something's wrong, and the police won't listen to me." Now, I should have told her to call the precinct, should have explained that I was retired, that I didn't do this anymore. But something in her voice, that desperation mixed with determination, reminded me of why I became a cop in the first place. Plus, Margaret had been complaining that I needed more excitement in my life. "Come in," I said. "Tell me what's going on." Sarah sat on my couch, her hands trembling as she began her story. Her neighbor, an 82-year-old man named Harold Petersen, had been missing for 4 days. Harold lived alone in a modest 2-story house and was known throughout the neighborhood for his punctuality and routines. Every morning at exactly 7:30, he would walk to the corner market to buy a newspaper and a cup of coffee. Every evening at 6, he would water his garden. Every Sunday, he would wash his car in the driveway. "He's never missed a day in the 3 years I've lived here," Sarah explained. Never. And suddenly, 4 days ago, he just disappeared. I leaned forward, my old instincts kicking in. "What did the police say?" "They said he's an adult and has the right to leave if he wants to. They said maybe he went to visit family or decided to take a trip. But Mr. Petersen doesn't have any family. His wife died 10 years ago, and they never had children. And he would never just leave without telling someone." The police response didn't surprise me. Missing persons cases involving elderly adults are tricky. Unless there's evidence of foul play, departments are reluctant to allocate resources. But Sarah's description of Harold's rigid routine was setting off alarm bells in my head. "Did you check his house?" I asked. "I tried looking through the windows. Everything looks normal, but I can't see much. His car is still in the garage. His mail is piling up in the mailbox. And—" She paused, looking embarrassed. "This might sound crazy, but I think someone has been going into his house." Now she had my full attention. "What makes you think that?" "I walk my dog past his house every morning and evening. For the past 3 days I've noticed little things. A light on in a room that was dark the day before. The curtains in the living room moved slightly differently. And yesterday, I could have sworn I saw someone moving around inside." I felt that familiar tingle, the one that told me there was more to this story. "Did you tell the police about this?" "I tried. They said I was being paranoid, that maybe Harold came back to get something and left again, but I know what I saw." Margaret appeared in the doorway with a cup of coffee for Sarah and gave me a look that said, "You're getting involved in this, aren't you?" She knew me too well. "Sarah," I said, "I'm going to help you, but we need to be smart about this. If someone is going into Harold's house, we need to figure out who and why." The first thing I did was what I always did. I went to see the scene for myself. Harold's house was a well-maintained two-story colonial with a small front yard and a detached garage. The lawn was starting to look a bit overgrown, and the mailbox was indeed stuffed with mail. But what caught my attention was something Sarah hadn't mentioned. There were no newspapers on the porch or in the yard. "That's odd," I muttered to myself. "What's odd?" Sarah asked. She had insisted on coming with me, and I figured an extra pair of eyes couldn't hurt. "You said Harold bought a newspaper every morning at 7:30. If he's been missing for 4 days, there should be 4 newspapers somewhere around here, unless someone's been picking them up," she finished. "Exactly." I walked around the house, noting the windows, the doors, any possible entry points. Everything looked secure from the outside. But when I got to the back door, I found something interesting. Fresh scratches around the lock. Subtle, but there if you knew what to look for. "Someone's been picking this lock," I told Sarah, "and they're good at it." I spent the next hour talking to other neighbors. Most of them confirmed Sarah's account of Harold's routine. But one neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Petersen, who lived across the street, told me something interesting. "I saw Harold talking to a man in a suit about a week ago," she said. "They were standing in Harold's driveway, and Harold looked upset. Not angry, just worried." "Can you describe the man?" "Tall, thin, dark hair. He was carrying a briefcase. I thought maybe he was selling something, but Harold usually doesn't talk to solicitors." That evening I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called in a favor from my old partner, Detective Ray Kowalski. Ray was still working cases and had access to resources I didn't. "Frank, you old dog," Ray said when he answered the phone. "I heard you were helping little old ladies cross the street in your retirement." Something like that. "Listen, Ray, I need a favor. Can you run a background check on a Harold Petersen? Lives on Maple Street." "You working a case?" "Just helping out a neighbor. Humor me." Ray called me back 2 hours later with information that changed everything. Harold Petersen wasn't just a retired widower living on his pension. He was a retired accountant who had worked for 30 years at Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's largest accounting firms. More importantly, he had been the firm's forensic accountant, specializing in tracking down financial irregularities and fraud. "Frank," Ray said, "this guy put a lot of people in prison over the years. Corporate executives, money launderers, tax evaders. If he's missing, it might not be voluntary." The next morning, I convinced Sarah to help me with a little surveillance. We parked across the street from Harold's house and waited. At 10:30, our patience paid off. A dark sedan pulled up to the curb, and a tall, thin man in a suit got out. He looked around nervously, then walked quickly to Harold's back door. "That's him," Sarah whispered. "That's the man Mrs. Petersen described." I watched as the man disappeared around the back of the house. Within minutes, he was inside. This was no casual break-in. This was someone who knew what they were looking for. "We need to call the police now," I told Sarah. "But first, I want to get a license plate number." As we were writing down the plate number, my phone rang. It was Ray. "Frank, I've got more information on your Harold Petersen. 3 months ago, he contacted the FBI about suspicious financial activity at his old firm. He thought someone was using the company to launder money. The FBI opened an investigation, but it went nowhere. Not enough evidence." Everything clicked into place. Harold hadn't just disappeared. He had been taken, and whoever took him was now searching his house for evidence that could expose their operation. "Ray, I need you to get units to 1247 Maple Street now. We've got a B&E in progress, and I think it's connected to something bigger." While we waited for the police, I called Margaret and told her to pack a bag. "Why?" she asked. "Because if I'm right about this, we might have company soon." The police arrived within 10 minutes, surrounding the house. The man inside tried to run, but was caught in the backyard. His name was Vincent Torres, and he was a mid-level manager at Morrison & Associates. Under questioning, he revealed that Harold had been getting close to exposing a money laundering operation that had been running through the firm for over 2 years. But Torres wasn't talking about Harold's location. He claimed he didn't know where Harold was, that he was just looking for documents that Harold might have taken from the office. That's when I realized we were looking at this all wrong. Harold wasn't just missing Ichiwo. He was hiding, and if he was smart enough to expose a money laundering operation, he was smart enough to disappear when he realized he was in danger. I spent the next 2 days thinking like Harold. Where would a careful, methodical man go if he needed to disappear? Somewhere safe, somewhere familiar, but not obvious. Then I remembered something Sarah had mentioned. Harold's wife had died 10 years ago. I asked Ray to check property records for any holdings in Harold's or his wife's name. "Frank, you're not going to believe this," Ray called me back. Harold's wife owned a small cabin about 2 hours north of the city. It's been sitting empty since she died, but the property taxes are still being paid. We found Harold at the cabin, alive but scared. He had been living off canned goods and bottled water, afraid to leave or contact anyone. When Vincent Torres had approached him that day a week ago, Torres had tried to convince Harold to hand over the evidence he'd gathered. When Harold refused, Torres had threatened him. "I knew they were watching my house," Harold told us. "I've been a forensic accountant for 30 years. I know how these people operate. So I packed a bag, left through my back door that night, and drove here. I've been trying to figure out how to contact the FBI safely." Harold's evidence was solid. Over the past year, he had documented how Morrison and Associates was being used to clean money for a drug operation. The scheme involved fake consulting contracts and inflated billing for services that were never performed. The money would come in dirty and go out clean, with the firm taking a percentage. The FBI reopened their investigation with Harold's new evidence. Vincent Torres was arrested along with 3 other employees at the firm and 2 clients who were part of the operation. The total amount of money laundered was over $15 million. But here's the part that really got to me. Harold had been planning to disappear permanently. He was going to abandon his life, his house, everything, because he was too scared to trust that the system would protect him. It was only when we found him that he realized he didn't have to run anymore. "Mr. Morrison," Harold said as we were leaving the cabin, "how did you know where to find me?" "Same way I solved cases for 35 years, I told him. "I put myself in your shoes and asked what I would do." The case made the local news, though the details were kept quiet because of the ongoing investigation. Sarah sent me a fruit basket and a card that said, "Thank you for proving that retirement doesn't mean giving up." But the real reward came 3 months later when Harold knocked on my door. He was holding a plate of homemade cookies and wearing a smile I hadn't seen during our first meeting. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "and I wanted you to know that I've decided to volunteer with the police department. They're setting up a program for retired professionals to help with white-collar crime investigations." "That's great, Harold. The department needs people with your skills." "Actually," he said, "I was wondering if you'd be interested in joining the program too. They could use someone with your experience." I looked at Margaret, who was standing behind me, trying not to smile. She had been dropping hints for months about me finding something to do with my time. "I'll think about it," I said. "Think about what?" Margaret asked after Harold left. "You know what. Frank Morrison, you've been moping around this house for 3 years complaining about being bored. This is your chance to do something meaningful again." She was right, of course. She usually was. 6 months later, I was back to working cases part-time as a volunteer consultant for the Chicago PD. Nothing too dangerous, mostly financial crimes and cold cases, but it gave me that sense of purpose I'd been missing. The Harold Petersen case taught me something important about retirement. It's not about stopping, it's about choosing what comes next. For 35 years, I had been solving mysteries because it was my job. Now I was solving them because I chose to. And you know what? The mysteries are just as satisfying when you're 70 as they were when you were 40. Maybe more so because now you have the experience to see patterns that younger detectives might miss. People ask me if I miss the old days, the big cases, the headlines. But I'll tell you what, I don't miss all. I don't miss the pressure, the politics, the feeling that every case was life or death. Now I can focus on the puzzle itself, on helping people like Sarah who need someone to listen to them. Harold still lives on Maple Street, still follows his routine, still buys his newspaper every morning, but now he waves when he sees me, and sometimes he stops by to share what he's learned working with the police department. Sarah got a dog after everything was over, a German Shepherd named Detective. She says it makes her feel safer, but I think she just wanted an excuse to call something detective. And me? I'm still solving mysteries, still putting together puzzles, Still getting that satisfaction when all the pieces click into place. The only difference is now I get to choose which puzzles are worth my time. That's the thing about being a detective, It's not really a job, it's a way of looking at the world. And that doesn't change when you retire. If anything, it gets stronger, because you finally have the time to really see what's in front of you. So if you're thinking about retirement, remember this It's not about ending something, it's about beginning something new. And sometimes, the best cases are the ones that choose you.